Welcome to FO Talks. I am Christopher Roper Shell. I worked 11 or a dozen years on Capitol Hill, more or less. Here at the Pentagon, ran for U.S. Congress. And with me is Vice Admiral Shekhar Sinha, here for a second time. We had a technical error. Actually, I made a technical mistake. And Vice Admiral was Vice Chief of the Indian Navy. He was a fighter pilot who took off from aircraft carriers and an instructor as well. He has traveled around the world, reads voraciously, and is jokingly called Top Gun. Also jokingly, we before this recording, you were getting an earful from the founder and editor-in-chief Atul Singh saying you can fly million-dollar or multi-million-dollar aircraft, but you didn't know anything about technology. And lo and behold, I was the one who did the big screw up. So, at any rate, you've been very patient with me and tolerant, and I thank you for being here. How are you doing, sir? Again.
Well, thank you, Chris, for getting me on your program. I always enjoy talking to the fair observer. Last time also Atul did some Hindi program, and I think it was really very good. So I'm very fine, thank you. Thank you for your very liberal comments on my introduction. But yes, now I say yes, I used to fly, that's about it.
Well, you and I, having spent now the better part of the morning in America here, we're getting to be good buddies. So it's good to have you with us. Let's jump right in. India is the biggest naval power in the Indian Ocean, has interests from Suez all the way to the Pacific. So we're going to work our way from west to east. As we have discussed on FO Talks before, the Red Sea is a vital link between Asia and Europe. In fact, the British constructed the Suez Canal in order to get to India. Now, the Houthis are threatening this route. How has India been involved in efforts to keep the sea lanes open?
Thank you for that question, Chris. The Indian Navy's primary task, which is written in our law books, is to protection of sea lanes of communication for world trade. It is not only for Indian trade. So that is our task, and we try and do that with as much sincerity as we can. And therefore, when the Houthis started attacking the ships in the inside the Red Sea, when they emerged from the Red Sea, they either were damaged or some of them were on fire. And the Indian Navy ships, which are out on patrol, as I mentioned earlier, that in 100 days we had 21 ships, deployed ships and submarine, and the P-8I, the Poseidon aircraft, and MQ-9, the UAVs deployed for surveillance.
The U.S.
900
drone, which you
That's
and I have discussed, which India leased two and secured a deal for 15, I think it
that's
is,
right. That's right.
which was announced during last year's state visit by Prime Minister Modi. I think
True.
it had one more hurdle to clear at that time, but it was more or less assured.
It's been clear. It has been clear.
Mhm,
Now it's
mhm.
just it's just a matter of the General Atomics beginning to supply those, the money, etc., whatever has been dealt, they are being transferred under the line of credit, etc. All that is happening. But
I want you
coming back to your
Before
question,
we get to that, I want you to mention how many vessels are deployed. You said a pretty substantial number. What was the number you just gave me?
how many people deployed on duty?
Well, you mentioned the number of naval vessels as well. Did you say
21.
21? That's what I
21
thought. So
vessels
that's
deployed
I
for
don't think
100 days.
yeah, I don't think that many people know that there is that kind of Indian naval presence. So,
Yeah.
and I'm sorry, continue. You said coming back to my question.
Yeah. It's much more. It's quite, as you yourself said, that Indian Navy is the most capable or the largest navy in this part of the world. Yes, it is. We have 160 odd ships, submarines at the moment, and likely to hit 200 in another 4 or 5 years. So the ships were deployed, aircraft were deployed, patrolling up and down, and immediately responding to the calls given by the ships which have been hurt, which have been damaged, or if there is an attempt of hijacking. And they have gone, they have sort of extinguished the fire. They have towed the ship into Indian shipyards, got it repaired, and sent them back home. So this is what the Indian Navy has been doing, and they have been doing quite well. I'll just add one more line that from the time the Houthis have started attacking the ships, the piracy from the Somalian pirates has increased all of a sudden. There has been a spurt. They have been trying to hijack ships. They have boarded. They have captured. But happily, the Indian Navy ships, the Marine commandos, who are something like your SEAL, they have boarded the ships. They have made sure that these pirates have either left the ship, and if they have not left, they have been captured and they have been brought to the Indian shores. They're all in the Indian prison, and they will be tried out because now we have our laws since last year by which we can, anybody who's doing an offensive against Indian person, Indian ship, or anything, it will be treated as an act of terrorism, and they will be tried under that act.
That's an interesting, an underreported story. I think I've only caught bits and bobs of that story. Uh, but the increase in piracy in conjunction with, if not coordination with, the Houthis, I think they're probably just opportunistic, and they see that they can more readily seize ships given the strain on collective navies. I can speak to the American side. The USS Carney just pulled into, well, not just a couple weeks ago, pulled into Florida, and they had been on a 235-day deployment, during which time they conducted 51 engagements over the course of 6 months, which surpassed the World War II record of the USS Hugh Hadley, which had engagements, the engagement record of 23 over that time. Uh, Slightly different subject, but one that's of keen interest to me as an American. India and Iran signed an agreement to develop the port of Chabahar in southeastern Iran. The U.S. threatened Delhi with sanctions. So, what is the story there?
You know, the Chabahar port deal goes back to agreement between India and Iran to 2002. India does not have any easy route to supply even normal business, trade, and commerce either with Afghanistan or with the Central Asian Republic. The amounts are very, very minuscule because Pakistan does not permit us to have a through passage. So, uh, because we have civilizational connect with Iran, and historically these two countries have been very friendly, the government of India and government of Iran, came to understand that the Chabahar port development could be given to the Indian government, and now they have come to conclusion that it will be on a 30-year lease for operations. Um, there was a lot of sanctions on Iran by the US, particularly for oil. So Indian government stopped buying any oil, which was quite a significant loss of revenue because they were giving us oil for a very reasonable price, less than the world price. And there was a refinery which could take that quality of crude and convert it into a petroleum product. So that the one entire refinery has been shut down because of this reason. Anyway, coming back to this, uh, because of the situation in Afghanistan, there was a human disaster really because people were suffering and not enough food. The Taliban were sort of on the offensive, and the ruling government did not control the entire country during Ahmad Karzai and Ghani's time. So the United States left this Chabahar project outside the ambit of sanction because it was meant for relief of people on human assistance, on a human rights issue that everybody has the right to survive. But what has happened now?
Effectively furthering the interests of the conflict. Well, furthering the interests certainly of the U.S. if you can reduce the humanitarian toll. So it was seen in a positive light by the U.S.
Definitely.
government,
Yes.
and they effectively blessed it, said
Yes.
that it no sanctions will apply at that
Yeah.
time.
But now what has happened, Chris, that, Americans are long, gone from that area because Taliban has actually taken over the control of that country. and they want to start the new trade. However, the condition of people is still quite bad. There's fair amount of, shall I say that, not enough grains, and it is not getting distributed to the persons in the areas where they actually need it. So
And India was a big supplier of said grains. I forget what
that's
it was in the early days of the US withdrawal, something like 50
that's
tons, I
that's
want to say, of grain.
that's you're right. But we still don't have any diplomatic recognition of Taliban government, because we still believe that it still falls in the category of a terrorist organization. They may have to do a relook, but that's up to the governments to decide. So it was decided that now the time has come that normal business can be started with the Afghans and through Afghanistan to the Central Asian republics, because we have very minuscule trade with these people. So this is a normal peacetime operation in addition to the human assistance being given to the Afghan people. So
So
our
for
embassy is not functioning, but there are people who are technical staff who make sure that the relief material reaches the right places in Afghanistan. So that
So,
is
from an
what is
Indian perspective, this is still a humanitarian pursuit. The only thing that has changed is the U.S. gave the port its blessing, given that there was a conflict going on. It has rethought that since withdrawing and the Taliban being in control. But India's view is still that this is in furtherance of a humanitarian cause. So, this has not changed the calculus for India, and they are continuing in this joint effort.
That's right. And in addition, that if there is a possibility for Afghanistan's economic situation has improved a little bit, and they are willing to start doing even normal trade so that they can earn a little more money. And that purpose will also be solved apart from the human assistance to the people who are in need. So the
Okay.
free rations, etc., will continue to be given in addition to the commercial department of Afghanistan. If they can buy something more, if they can buy something for a normal trade, uh, commerce between two establishments, then that should also start. That's why it has been given on a 30-year lease. Hopefully, that by then situation will improve. India also feels that using this route to get into Central Asian markets will be possible, because there is a railway line which is running through the Central Asian Republic, and it enters a place called Mazar-e-Sharif in Afghanistan. And from there, there are small areas which have train lines. Otherwise, the road connectivity exists. So it is quite possible that this may be used. I don't know how it's going to happen. That is the imagination. What will happen is that, possibly we will be able to get into the Central Asian Republic market. But
So it
also
is
there's
a 30-year lease to the Iranians. It
to
is
the
a
yeah,
it is a joint project. Iran presumably is investing substantial sums of
yeah,
money into this
that's right.
this port,
That's right.
um, and it is viewed principally by the Indian government as a humanitarian effort for the Afghanis.
Primary objective, yes. But it is also, visualize that there will be commercial activity which will commence, because the Afghans they want to buy some grains that we supply free of cost for the humanitarian aid. It is quite possible that in some areas they will start buying, because we have been saying that, look, there is a limit. We can't go. We have already
Sure.
spent $3 billion in Afghanistan. So
Yeah.
now the governments are saying that, we can work out some percentage. You buy from us,
Okay.
you pay for. Yeah,
So
that
we
is it.
go from warming relations with Iran. Actually, I want to ask one follow-up there. You said there are civilizational ties between India and Iran.
That's
What do you mean by civilizational ties?
if you go back into history, uh, there was there's a Persian rule. It was the Persian area. That's why it's called the Persian Gulf. And the um, Indians in the past, they had all learned Persian language, and there was also commerce through the small, we call them dhows, DHOW. They are
Hmm.
like commercial ships, small ships, and that used to trade between Iran, Bandar Abbas, and the ports in Gujarat. The commercial items, the ingredients would go, what shall I say, condiments would go from here, and dry fruits would come from that side. So this exchange has been going on for hundred thousands of years, actually. So we have had,
So
yeah,
both trade, cultural, intellectual, India and Iran have been doing this
yeah.
for, as you said,
Now I'll
thousands of years.
also add here, some people may not be knowing, those who are watching, that Persians were not Muslims, right? They are the Zoroastrians. Okay. But when the Islamization of that area commenced and Iran slowly started converting to Islam, lot of these Persians who did not want to, Zoroastrians who didn't want to take the Islamic sort of culture and religion, they fled from there and came to India. So we have a very good population of Zoroastrians and doing very well. I'll tell
There's
you
a
something,
yes, sir.
Mr. Ratan Tata, he's a Parsi. Mr. Adi Godrej, Jamshed Godrej, you take any big names, they're all Parsis. So the Persian speaking people, right? And they're not Muslims. They're Zoroastrians. And the different holy book, the different culture. So from that time, even then, even after Islamization, there are a lot of people in Iran, people speak Persian. So the language connectivity is still there. And people
So
have their
there's a
ancestors, they
cross-pollination that has occurred for a very long time.
very long time. I mean, thousands of years.
So we go
So
from these ancient ties and some new ones with the current port to the Maldives, which recently asked Indian troops to leave. Why were the Indian troops there? Number one, and number two, why were they asked to leave?
well, these are very small island countries, and the ruling class there tends to, depending upon which part of the pendulum they are in, they swing between their good equation with China or to India. So we have had alternately the governments which were more inclined to have friendship with India. Now the president who has come and the government, they have come on a plank that India is too much into the penetration, so India should go out. So India said, fine, we get out. I mean, it's for you to decide.
So it's
And
the
these,
pendulum swing of governmental parties,
that's right.
those who uh, are okay with friendly relations with India, and then those who say, wait, now we're a little bit too close,
Yeah,
and we want to move a bit away.
yeah,
And what were the Indian troops doing while they were there?
yeah.
I
Just
mean,
coming back
were
to that,
these military activities that led the government of the Maldives to say, "Hey, we don't really want a whole military presence"?
not really, Chris. These are all we gave them Dornier aircraft and helicopters for medical and casualty evacuation from different islands to Malé for the treatment of people, mainly casualty evacuation. And this
So
is what
medical
they would,
treatment.
that's right, medical treatment. So these are the boys who are the in uniform. In India, the service aircraft is maintained by people in uniform. Sorry, not by the civilians. So they're all basically maintenance crew who are in uniform because the aircraft belongs to Indian Navy or to Coast Guard. It has been given on sort of long-term lease without any money. So these are the guys who are maintaining it, and these are the guys who are flying it. So
And oh, go ahead, sir.
they're not the fighting troops, really. None of them are fighting troops.
Okay, so why the love? You don't give without getting in this world most of the time. Why care?
The present government is the present president and the government is more inclined to the Chinese, and they feel that the Indians have had their say enough because we were also giving them large number of financial aid. A lot of projects were being run by Indian government,
I guess
development.
that's my question though. Why give so much? What was the purpose, the idea behind the Indian troops being there? What
Well,
was
as
the
I said,
Indian interest? I mean, you're saying they're flying people for medical purposes, but
that's
why do so? Why even care?
Because you have a friendly country, they are weak, they are not very rich, and they are in the neighborhood. The Indian government has the policy of neighborhood first. So that in the neighborhood first policy of the government, all these island countries and any neighboring country you name, India has given them aid, India has given them lines of credit to develop. Because Prime Minister Modi's government feels that India cannot prosper if the neighboring countries do not prosper. And he's got an acronym called SAGAR, SAGAR. What it means is security and growth, SAG, for all in the region. So he looks at this entire thing as the Indian Ocean region. And he believes that, the government believes that, yes, we have to, keep them friendly. And this is not something new. If you go back to histories into 19th century earlier, when the Brits were here, one of the governor generals, okay, though he was not very popular, a name will come to me, and he said that if India has to avoid the lurking of Chinese on the northern borders, it must make sure that its neighbors are happy. And that is where India's future lies.
Well, we're
That
actually, that's a good segue into a couple of other points. We're going to talk about China in a second. Speaking of India's neighbors, Bangladesh is participating in China's Belt and Road Initiative, and the two nations' militaries are conducting military exercises together. Is India worried? It's also worth noting, I'm sure many of our listeners already know this, that there is effectively a frozen conflict on the border between India and China. So does this coordination with Bangladesh, is it cause for concern for India, given that it has this this neighborly relations policy?
Well, I wouldn't say that we are worried, but we are concerned very much. This issue has been raised with the government of Bangladesh, and they have assured that we are doing it because we are not inimical to anybody else, no country. And we feel that the Chinese support here is not going to impact our relation with India and the security of India. So we
Okay.
take their word. And it only indicates that we don't really interfere in decision making of any country, even if they are very friendly. So it's fairly transparent deal. You look at Sri Lanka, Hambantota port, Colombo port, the Chinese have come and said, and who bailed them out from the debt trap? $3.3 billion of credit line, India. So the point is that, we really, you run your country, you are an independent, democratic country, you decide what you want to do. Yes, you tell me what you want from me. If it is possible, I'll do it for you. Right? But yes, please
To,
make sure that my security concerns are addressed.
yeah.
So they have,
To build on
so
your word, inimical, far from inimical, you recently the Philippines have received the BrahMos missiles. Vietnam has expressed interest in the missile. So there is a warming of relations, seemingly, even farther afield. And how do you see those relations developing, and how does that affect China?
well, Chris, the South China Sea is has been on heat for quite some time, and particularly because of the Chinese stating that the entire almost 80% of ownership of South China Sea is with them, irrespective of whether they are in their EZ or not in their EZ. And every country, virtually five countries, have the claims what the Chinese are claiming. And on and off, this it triggers a fair amount of animosity between these two countries, or any of the two countries with China. We have seen that happening with Vietnam. We have seen that happening partially with Indonesia, and now it is Philippines. As you know, that
Certainly,
the
the
Chinese,
Philippines have been more aggressive since Marcos came to power. He has brought journalists to show the Chinese Coast Guard aggression and how they're. You said 80% the South China Sea. It seems that there's a new dot in the line China draws. Expanding their reach with every new map.
yeah,
So you can see Vietnam and the Philippines expressing interest in these missiles as a defensive measure, I suppose. and
Yeah,
India is interested in supplying those. Uh, is this missile new? Is it something that India has been developing?
yeah, it's a joint development between Russia and India, and it has been in service for, which year was that? 1996, 97. From then onwards, we have been developing. It was tried out on the Indian ships in the year 2000, 2001, 2002. It has been operational on our ships, aircraft, and submarines. And now the present government of Prime Minister Modi, when it came to power, they said that we must export ammunition and platforms to countries where we have convergence of interest. So we have convergence of interest with these countries. That is because the expansionist attitude of China, PRC, is quite visible on our borders. It is also visible in South China Sea, much more than what is on our borders. And
How do
therefore,
you view those Chinese ambitions? I mean, we have the string of pearls, as they're called, where China is sort of getting into India's neighborhood. Obviously, Vietnam and the Philippines feel increasingly threatened. I think that's a logical conclusion based on these weapons purchases from India. So, how do you view those ambitions in the South China Sea?
the ambitions are what they're claiming. I mean, they say it's a historical claim of so much of area belongs to us, and therefore we will take it back. They had a fight first in Paracel Islands, they had in Spratly Island, they have kicked the Vietnamese out of those places, and they have virtually made military bases on most of these islands. And therefore, they have effectively reduced the security cover given by the US Navy in all these areas. All these countries, now what has happened, Chris, that the economically, China is the biggest trade partner of nearly 120 countries in the world, right? Now, these are smaller countries, and therefore, economically, they are quite dependent on China. Whereas now they have realized that for security, it is not safe to be with China because China is the main cause of worry as far as security is concerned. So, what has happened that in the recent past, while economically they're dependent on the Chinese, for security, they all fall back on the shoulders of US. And see what has happened in Philippines. They have permitted
Yeah,
now US to have a base.
yeah,
And
and so
Americans
right,
have
the
come back.
expansion there, yeah, and certainly no
Yeah,
country has greater security concerns than Taiwan.
that's
Uh,
correct.
Taiwan has a new president who has uh, broken precedent. I think it happened once before, where the same party has retained power for three consecutive elections. How is India involved with Taiwan, or I suppose, what is the status of relations there?
We believe we have one China policy, so we don't treat Taiwan as a separate country as such because diplomatically it is not recognized. But we have business with Taiwan. We have commercial sort of tie-up agreements, and right now it is about 7.5 or almost $8 billion, which the aim is to by 2030 to make it about $20 billion. So there's a lot of trade between these two countries, which are these two commercial entities, if you like, if I don't call Taiwan a country. And we have a trade and cultural office in Taiwan in Taipei, and they have office here. And they also have sub offices, which they call consulates. In Mumbai, it is in Chennai, in these two places. But we have only one in Taipei. So
Mhm.
there are people who do all this talking, business, etc. There is a fair amount of travel, not at the ministerial level, but at the level of the officials. There is fair amount of interaction. So this is completely a commercial one so far. But
Okay, so yes, sir.
yeah, but the Indo-Pacific Maritime Domain Awareness Network, which is in the making, when you ask the next one, maybe I can explain that. That will make sure that these four Quad countries, US, Japan, Australia, and India, they all can see every surface vessel in the entire Indo-Pacific region and possibly see that who is breaking the existing laws of the sea. United Nations
So if
Convention.
I read you correctly, and we're going to get to the Quad in just a second, there is a degree of intelligence sharing, obviously amongst Quad partners. We'll get to that in just a second. But you're saying also with Taiwan, just sort of eyes on who's there.
No, that has not happened yet. That hasn't happened, but you have the satellite systems belonging to these four countries, and they're looking at entire Indo-Pacific, which is a very large area. Why only Taiwan? There will be even ships coming out of China. Ships coming out of not only Japan, may be coming out of Russia. So basically, it is designed to see that illegal fishing, which I'm afraid that the PRC is the largest violator. 95% of all illegal fishing in the world is by Chinese fishing boats. And none of them are only fishing boats. They're all snooping, right? They're
Hmm.
all snooping. They have radars. They have satellite communication directly. They're paid from the PLA sort of, budget. So I would say that it is more of a dual use technology, if you wish. But primarily to get to know, the Quad countries must know who is operating where. We don't know the identity, but commercial ships are supposed to have an IMO number, right?
Okay.
If you're seeing it from satellite, or when it comes on the radar screen, and if you just press a button on that particular contact, it will tell you which ship, where from, where is it going, what is the cargo, who's the master.
I think are you talking about transponders, which China and then Russia under oil sanctions, they've been known to turn off their transponders and appear and
Well, the
reappear.
automatic identification system,
Hmm. Hmm.
right? But
And all,
with
yes, sir.
satellite and radar, they don't recognize. They are only seeing it as a spot. It is for
Hmm.
us to drive the get the transponder information. It is for the user. It is for the user to click and get the information out.
I see.
Okay.
Also, to your point about fishing vessels, frequently Chinese illegal quote unquote fishing vessels are, as you said, snooping. And
Absolutely.
they are often rather curiously minded, guarded by the Chinese Coast Guard.
Very
Now,
much.
my understanding, and this is something you know vastly better than I do, the guise of the Coast Guard, because it is less militarily invasive, not considered the military, allows it to operate in a sort of gray zone and give sanction or license to these fishing vessels that at times don't appear to be doing a lot of fishing.
No, you're absolutely right. This is what the gray zone warfare is. Just keep it, a shade below full warfare.
Yeah,
So they will
yeah,
say we are not, and warfare meaning what? If they're not naval ships, they don't belong to PLA Navy.
right,
They're
right,
of course
right,
not.
right.
So,
Now,
they will like to be legally correct. This is what the Chinese do. They would like to be
yeah.
legally correct, but do very similar activities.
Letter of the law, not the spirit of it.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh,
Correct.
now we've talked briefly about the Quad. We've talked about Taiwan. Certainly, you've got Australia, Philippines, Japan, and they have held joint military drills along with India. There's a rumor of a new security partnership between these four countries. Is India involved with this security cooperation amongst these countries?
No, not yet. I mean, the Quad does not include any maritime security aspect. It deals with more of economic security and less of military security, not less, completely off. The economic security, meaning that, get the diversification of supply chain out of China into more friendly democratic countries, number one. Secondly, making of vaccines and pharmaceutical items to give it to poorer countries, either free of cost or at a very concessional rate, to all the countries in the Indo-Pacific, periphery, who need this kind of help. Number two. Number three is this satellite communication, satellite maritime domain awareness, education. There are students who have gone on scholarship to American universities. Some have gone to Japanese universities. Some Australians have come to Indian IITs. Primarily that you raise the level of the technology in all these areas so that subsequently they can sustain manufacturing of latest items which could be dual use or which could be military. So that's a slightly long-term, not long trajectory. The US has realized that it cannot ensure maritime security in the entire world on its own. That's why you will have to have reliable partners, reliable allies in different sectors. If you look at Quad, if you see Indian Ocean, you got India. If you see South China Sea and that part, you got Japan. And US is present everywhere, actually. And if you go to Pacific, you find Australia at the US. So you have this one,
And
shall I say,
Australia recently ordered some U.S. nuclear submarines. There was a bit of a kerfuffle with the French. They had the contract originally. Australia decided they wanted nuclear submarines. They sort of switched the contract. So Australia is increasing its military might, its naval might, its presence there. Uh,
yeah, look,
Not to inject my opinion because you're the expert, but I've been saying for a long time that America cannot, we don't have the means to police the world. There's an old movie, Team America, World Police. It's
no,
amusing
no,
for
no,
those who haven't
no,
seen it,
no, no,
but we
no,
can't do
Christopher,
this.
I don't fully agree with what you're saying. Why?
Oh, okay.
It's not that America does not have so many assets. America has the same assets, what it had, but the gap between America and China has reduced. Okay. You can't call it that American
The gap
forces have
in
declined.
military sophistication and
That's
power.
right. More
Okay.
military and economic. The gap has
Okay.
reduced. And that is making other people believe that that America is a waning power. I'm sorry, I don't agree with this. I have told this to Americans, they don't believe it. I told this to my American friend. Look, you have not declined, man. The other guy has caught up with you. And I still believe whatever little I know of America and China. I traveled to China. In fact, I was in China just 2 weeks back. Whatever I see, I believe that Chinese will take at least 2-3 decades to come anywhere close to what America is today. But in these 2 decades, America would have gone far ahead. Technologically, they can't catch up. They can, you see, they don't invent. Americans invent. These guys can only innovate. They can only develop. They will steal, they will
Reverse
develop,
engineer.
change it.
Reverse engineer and
They
steel.
openly
Okay.
say it. They ask me why I went to bloody reverse engineer so and so. I said, we go by agreements, we don't do it. It's in principle it is wrong. They said, no, we do it. I said, I know you do it. I've spoken in the universities. I speak very often in that university. And I tell them, in fact, there is a forum called Shanzhang Forum, which is conducted by the China Academy of Military Science. They've invited me every year to give a talk. And it's an international one.
Mhm.
This time also I went after COVID, they've just started. I was speaking in a panel where I had a vice chief of their Navy, retired vice chief. We had one guy who's Chinese, but he's he's a Taiwanese, but he's pro-China. And we had one guy from Norway who was into judiciary. So we had all good, and then we had one former chief of Sri Lankan Navy, and it was being chaired by an American doctor, I mean, a professor who I know. So this came out as luck would have it. That is the day when the Chinese ship had just gone and banged into a Filipino ship. I said, there you are. He said, no, it belongs to us. I said, hang on. Is that the way? If it is yours, you go to court, see what they say. It's not that just because you have might, it is your right to kick him out. I'm sorry, that's not civilized way. You're a civilizational country. You can't be doing like this. So that is why you are actually, and subject was quite funny, preventing maritime illegal activities or something like that. I said,
Uh-huh.
I said, you are the
Yeah.
one who's,
Yeah.
I said, the first thing, don't create it. Managing maritime something, managing maritime disputes or something. I said, no.
Yeah.
You don't create. Why have you created? We don't have any. We have had with Bangladesh, we have resolved. In fact, we lost a lot of area, but we went by what the ICJ said, International Court of Justice. We
Well,
lost a
this
lot of,
is, go ahead,
yeah,
sir.
we lost a lot of EZ exploration area to Myanmar, but we said, no, let's be more magnanimous. These are smaller countries. They want to, dig holes somewhere, let them dig. that kind of thing.
But we're opening a whole new can of worms. I
Yeah.
suppose we'll have to address this on another day. But for now, I want to thank you very much for spending so much time with me and with our listeners. And I hope to have you back and chat with you again soon. Thank you very
Oh, give
much,
me
sir.
Join the conversation at Fair Observer and subscribe to our YouTube channel.